What's up, guys? So, as previously stated on a couple of other vlogs, I have a couple of different content things queued up, some unboxings and some looks at some collector's editions. But one I want to do first, because I have it in hand, because it's fresh in the mind, fresh in the spirit, as it were, is my review of this book, Red Rising, by Pierce Brown. It's the first in a set of a trilogy, and then there's a second trilogy afterwards that's currently releasing. But the first trilogy is already out. That follows the story of a young lad named Darrow and his sort of harrowing journey through some interesting socio-political climates, as well as sort of interpersonal relationships. And I guess I kind of want to try and give a broad overview before I dive into spoiler territory, and just say that from my perspective the book is well written. It's very kind of fast paced in terms of there's not necessarily stuff happening all the time, but the quickness with which everything is sort of gone through makes it an easy read, makes it an enjoyable read, and makes it one where you got to kind of sort of plan out your breaks. As you know, if you read one chapter too many, you've got to read 3 chapters, because there's no break really in between sort of some of the action bits. Starts a little slow. The third act is a little quick, but I don't think that either of those things detract from the overall narrative arc of any of the characters. And I think from a storytelling standpoint, there's a lot of good sci-fi. There's a lot of good fantasy inspiration, but there's also a lot of interesting takes on stuff that we've seen from some like young adult novels. I don't think you would classify this as young adult at all. But I think that some of the tropes that things like Hunger Games or Insurgent or things like that kind of go through, I think that this hits them a lot harder, again with a more political twinge to them, and also with a more sci-fi twinge. So the central conceit of the book is that society has basically been broken down into various colors, and that is sort of the caste system that you're placed in at birth. And these colors are, various things. And it's interesting because the colors that they use, you would sort of associate them with these colors a little bit, in terms of it makes like logical sense, which is good. So like the golds are like the ruling class. The pinks are like your pleasure servants in sort of like post-dystopian society that's been made. You have obsidians, which are like these gargantuan monsters. You have grays, which are like clerical people. You have blues, greens, which are electronics and healers, I believe, like medical aid. And then you have like violets are the creatives, so on and so forth, until you get to the reds, which are considered the lowest of the low. They are the working class, which is actually interesting because this first book takes place on Mars. I presume at some point they will probably branch out, but Darrow is from Mars and Darrow is a red, which I think is interesting because Mars was the first planet that was basically attempted to be terraformed after the colonies from Earth colonized the moon. They moved to Mars, right? What's interesting about that is that obviously Mars is a red planet, red soil. There's nothing really about the color red to me that intrinsically says slave or lower class or serf or anything like that, right? So I think it's an interesting play that, or an interesting, I guess, dynamic that because they also, all the Reds live underground, right? Working underground to mine a specific mineral that is helping terraform the planet. Um, that they would say, okay, Reds are the lower class, because then you think like if they were on another planet whose soil isn't red, you know, there's no like logical through line between why something would be red as a slave there. So I think that's interesting. Um, that it seems like because of the method in which they were built by society, that Reds became the slaves based purely on the fact that Mars was red, right? It doesn't actually change anything, right? Like if Mars had been green and the Greens had been slaves, there's not necessarily anything different about the story. I just found that interesting that sort of like paved the way from like a societal standpoint, from a lore standpoint. Um, but yeah, the character arcs are very good all the way through. Minor characters and major characters have meaningful interactions. They have meaningful growth. There are breadcrumbs that they put along to let you know that some things probably aren't what he's necessarily writing about, and then some things are definitely going to change over time. And they kind of introduce a couple characters, leave a couple characters, to sort of flesh out the broader story. And I think it's all really well done. One thing that I really thought was interesting about the writing style of the book in particular was that a lot of the sentence structure and a lot of the dialogue is very choppy, and I can't tell if that was an intentional point to reflect the speech patterns of uh, what would what is later revealed to be like basically the Reds like brains aren't even as developed as other colors. So I couldn't decide if that was supposed to be like an internal reflection because it's not only Darrow and the other Reds that have that some sort of choppiness, or if that was just an intentional sort of creative decision. But it kind of makes you pause sometimes while you're reading, which isn't a bad thing, but it just is one of those things where it's like the unevenness of the footing, you know, breaks up sort of you as you're reading through, and I think it, you know, caused me to stop and read a couple things a little bit more carefully than I would have normally. So definitely would recommend the book for anyone who is into fantasy, who is into sci-fi in particular, who just wants kind of a good, solid read. You can honestly just read this book and come out of it and go, that was a fully, you know, ABC plotline story. That was a full 1, 2, 3 acts. I have an entire story, and that's all I need to read. Or you can continue through the trilogy. I've also heard that the trilogy does the same thing. You have everything sort of wrapped up nicely. There's obviously questions that I have going into the second book, but like I said, it could be a standalone novel. That being said, 8.5 minutes in, I'm going to head into some spoiler territory. And I don't want to necessarily even talk about this too much, but for anyone who has read the book, who is watching this, just a little bit of engagement, a little bit of talking about some of the finer details. I'd like to see what you guys have to say. So again, spoilers ahead. There will be spoilers in 3, 2, 1, go. All right. So one of the things, and I'm just going to jump right to the end. So if you didn't jump out, you fucked. One of the biggest things that I really, really liked is they set up a character named Mustang, and they set her up to be the betrayer. They set her up to be like the ultimate sort of Deus Ex Machina character, where she tricks the main character Darrow the whole time and fucking ends up, you know, beating him in the end. They even have Darrow prepare for the fact that she is going to betray him, and then she doesn't. She delivers on her promise, as it were. She delivers on her word, which is something that is very interesting because in this society where golds are sort of the ruling class, the golds, family is very important, pride is very important, and she kind of sacrificed both to make sure that she kept her word to Darrow. So that I like that happened. I like that it wasn't predictable in that sense. So yeah, so jumping back to the beginning, this is the story of a slave. Basically, it's your typical uprising story. Wife gets killed. He's very mad. He ends up actually also kind of getting killed, but someone saves him right after he hangs there. He gets basically captured by a rebellion. The rebellion transforms him, a red, into a gold, both physically, mentally, emotionally to an extent, and puts him in this thing called the Institute, which this is kind of where that sort of Hunger Games aspect comes into it. The Institute's where 100 golds go, and they are divided up among houses. The houses are very steeped in Roman mythology, and basically there's one winner. They have a giant battle, right? And no one's supposed to die. They have different things and different ways to keep the kids alive. It's just supposed to be sort of like this like ruthless battle test about physical prowess, about political intrigue, and making sure that your alliances are good and everything. And so we meet a variety and a cast of characters. Interestingly enough, the actual Reds, we only meet really a couple of key characters, which are Darrow's wife, whom is the central character of the story. That's sort of the catalyst for the rebellion. We meet Darrow's uncle, and then there are a couple of other minor Red characters, and this is again something that I think that they're trying to sprinkle in. There's some minor Red characters, and then Greys, who are kind of like the people who the slave masters of the Reds, that they introduce, and I think that they'll be important later. Some of those people will tie back in, but I thought it was interesting that they didn't spend a whole lot of time developing characters. I keep saying they, it's he. He didn't spend a whole lot of time developing characters too much. I think that's a smart decision. And so then, obviously, Darrow gets out. He's getting transformed. You meet a lively cast of characters. A guy who is a carver, who's like making him into a different person. The head of the he claims he's not the head, but he's probably the head, but he might not be the head because this book has a thing of sort of undermining expectations of like the resistance group. You meet a guy who basically trains Darrow in order to be a gold, and then he gets shipped off to the Institute, where you kind of meet all of these basically kids, right? These are all like 16, I think, year old kids who are fighting in this Institute to sort of prove themselves so that they can be basically adopted into different houses or different royalty, and they can, it's basically how you sort of seed yourself into the society overall. And so what I really like about the sort of battle royale aspect of this is they come right out of the fucking gate with like, Darrow meets this dude, he's super awesome, he has a little brother, they're getting along. Darrow has to kill the little brother immediately. And that obviously serves as a catalyst for a lot of things down the road, but what it does is it reinforces Darrow's resiliency. It reinforces his character arc as truly kind of sacrificing for the greater good and really believing in what he's doing. And so it starts right off the bat that Darrow can make hard decisions. And then also that he can make decisions that bite him in the ass, right? Because he basically lets someone else sort of take the fall for that guy's death for a little while. And then that guy ends up dying, and then that causes like this whole issue. And I really like, for the most part, the conflict and resolution arcs in the novel never seem to be forced by decision making that is untrue to the characters, which is something that I hate when happens in a book or in a TV show, where someone just does something so fucking phenomenally stupid and you're like, they would never do that. Or that someone's so stupid that they keep making mistakes that they should have learned from, right? And I think they do a really good job of having each character grow in a way that is true to the character that he builds. I keep saying they. The character that he built, and the character arc, and how it ties back into the overall arc of the story. I don't want to give away too much, too many more things. I think I hit on sort of the major points that I really enjoyed the novel. There's a couple of chapters after sort of Darrow has found out that he's betrayed this guy and killed his younger brother, where he's sort of like regrouping with another particular character, Mustang, and those were very interesting chapters to watch him sort of rebuild his army, to watch him sort of grow from nothing back up to something, and the way that he does it, the way that he manipulates, and the way that he kind of does commands and leads, and sort of the romantic subplot in there as well, because why wouldn't there be? I think was really well done. That was probably my favorite part of the book. Was I think it's part 4. And it's called The Reaper, and I think that like the first couple chapters in there are just really fucking solid. But like I said, I would totally recommend the book, 100%. So this has gone on for far too long. Once again, this was a review of Pierce Brown, Red Rising. This is the like limited edition Barnes & Noble re-release hardcover. It's pretty fucking awesome. Like I said, I definitely recommend it. So yeah, that's gonna be the vlog for the day. Hope at least someone enjoyed the old book review. Whoa, I just hit settings on my stream. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow.